So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is going to be another custom scenario made by Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud. I thought I had two left, but actually the other one that was sent was a rerun, essentially, of the Dwarf Rudauer siege that we saw, from your perspective, I think, a couple of weeks back. So for now, this is the last one that I've been sent from the batch of scenarios that I was given, but given the fact that I'm running more than a month ahead of schedule at this point, I'm sure that I'll get sent a few more in the interim, because these do tend to get run in clutches and then sent across, and they're always a fun time. This one is actually on a map that we've seen several times before, so it's essentially a scenario that's been bolted onto an already existing map, and this is of course the facsimile of Umbar that is in 3rd Age Reforged. The river running through the city, and then the two halves of it. Only normally we see sort of half and half of the city occupied by both sides, because that's how the regular battles work. On this occasion though, Umbar has been occupied by the Easterlings of Rhun, and will need to be retaken in its entirety, so it'll be interesting to see how Umbar go about doing that. It's a large city as well, even for 4 runic armies to try and cover the entirety of adequately. We shall see. We'll go through the attacking armies first of all, no need to go through too much of the map because we've already seen it a few times before. Starting off with DF Morris playing as the first of the Umbar armies looking to reclaim their capital. Balaketh Marksman with the armour upgrade. In terms of units on foot as well, Rhun, the only advantage they really have is the armour piercing, both from their crossbows, javelins and in melee of course. But when it comes to just sheer heft and bulk, then the Umbar infantry definitely has an edge pretty much across the board, and certainly in terms of skirmishing, the Balaketh marksmen are going to be better than anything that Rhun can really throw at them. In terms of damage, of course, they have rangers, but that's kind of a different kettle of fish altogether. And the mainline infantry, Alcarondas Legion. Yes, the armour piercing of the flag rim is useful against them, but as an all-purpose unit, the Alcarondas Legion are the superior option. If Umbar as well, because it is a 4v4, they will have the higher quality armies most certainly, given that this is a siege. 2 units of Rhun Aru Sentinels as well. Rhun don't have a pikeman, of course, they only have that halberdier unit, so if it does come down to a late game tussle between phalanxes, that is somewhere else where Umbar will win. There's very few pikes in the game that are better than the Rhun Aru Sentinels, and of course Rhun don't have any pikes at all, so they don't need to worry in those terms. Corsair Blackguards as well, which will be an interesting unit to see used, because their javelins are very, very deadly. They don't have much ammunition, mind you, but they can also double as decent makeshift line infantry when all is said and done. So Umbar, very well built for this kind of battle, to be honest with you. They're also not completely devoid of armour piercing themselves, even if it is Rhun's shtick. They have some Balaketh Axguard here, again with the armour upgrade. With the armour upgrade in tow, with they're actually higher than average melee defence for a heavy axe unit. It's still not amazing, but it's better than most other axe units of this type. They can be really, really useful, and at cracking their way through stuff like the Scion Rim, they can be very, very handy indeed. Belagai footmen are of course just basic spears. This is one of the aspects of the Umbar army which is pretty average, to be honest with you, because their damage is very low even for a spear unit, considering the malice that they have to work with, but they're still good for padding out the line, and they're a decent defensive unit as well. Balaketh Shield Bearers, this is an aspect where Rhun actually do have a bit of an advantage, because the flag rim tend to perform better than the Shield Bearers in most situations, but even so, Umbar still have this mace unit which can be useful at cracking their way through the armoured units that Rhun do have. And at the back we have some Rhun Aru Royal Guard and Ardenheim Shield Guard, so it's the Black Numenorian Corps here at the back. I believe, yep, there is Castamir, or one of them anyway, marching with his Royal Guard, not multiple HP, but pretty much as tough as a unit can be without being multiple HP. And there is some Corsair Fence as well, an assassin unit with a throwing projectile, and very, very deadly up close and personal and melee as well, albeit quite lightly armoured. Then we have Eclipse himself, who sent me the battle replay, so big thank you to him. He has got some Ardenheim Shield Guard as well. We'll go through the rest of the Umbar armies a little bit quicker. Belagai footmen, unless we come across a new unit that we haven't seen yet, of course. Balaketh marksmen are a really, really bulky skirmish line overall, it looks like, for Umbar. Going to be tough for Rhun to have to deal with that. More Alcarondas Legion here on the second line, again being backed up by Balaketh Axguard and Rhun Aru Sentinels. Belagai footmen on either side, Corsair Blackguards again. Eclipse has got a catapult, which you can't crumble any walls on Umbar, of course, because it's sort of built into the natural cliffs. But, having said that, it can still be useful for clearing out a choke point, especially if Rhun really bulk up with stuff like Gamp Rim, Flag Rim and Scion Rim. It'll be interesting to see how Umbar responds to that sort of thing. Belagai pikemen, so just a basic unit of pikes, but even this unit can be very useful because of course Rhun do not have an equivalent at all. But even with the armour upgrade, of course, probably going to be one of the targets for Rhun's archers on those cliffs if they can manage it. Narun Aru Royal Guard back here as well, which is actually where the general is, which means these Harbingers of Castamere, the multiple HP heavy swordsmen that Umbar have, can be used a little bit more freely. We shall see if that does indeed prove to be the case. Over on the other side of the river, going to be attacking the south side of the settlement, we have Froggy, who again, plenty of Alcarondas Legion, so certainly a really heavy duty force from Umbar coming here to reclaim their capital. 2 units of Balakith Axe Guard, 2 units of Balakith Shield Bearers, and then over here more Balakith Marksmen, Black Numenorian units as well in the Ardenheim Shield Guard and the Narun Aru Royal Guard, more Corsair Blackguards. He too has got some Harbingers of Castamere. Interestingly enough, this is a unit which, to my knowledge, no longer exists in the Umbar roster, the Corsair Savages, but they're here. So they are a lower tier Axeman, and they do have the armour upgrade, but of course they were a very lightly armoured unit, they always were, before they were removed from the general rotation. Narun Aru Sentinels and some Corsair crossbows, and the final Umbar army we have over here is going to be Master Blaster. Good to see Master Blaster playing again. We've got some Corsair Blackguards here, we've got some Balagar Footmen, Shield Bearers, a Catapult, Balakith Marksmen, Alcarondas Legion. I'd imagine it's going to be very similar all around. Balakith Shield Bearers, we've got some Ardenheim Shield Guard, Axe Guard, Royal Guard, Harbingers, and Balagar Pikemen. So yeah, pretty much exactly what you'd expect. There could be some fences hidden in these sections as well. We shall have to wait and see. Now, onto the Runic Defenders, starting off here in the bottom corner with Buzzard. He has got some Scion Rim. Very useful unit for holding the lines, of course. Bulky enough to withstand some of the punishment that Umbar dish out, but they won't have the damage necessary to actually keep pace with Umbar in that sense. So while they can act as a good blocker, they will need support if they are going to do the damage needed to win this battle. Kamul's Chosen, multiple HP bodyguard unit, not as good as the Harbingers of Castamere across the way in class, but still will be useful if it comes down to a sheer quality tussle in the late game. Rhun probably don't want that overall, but still. Flag Rim, going to be very, very important for the armour piercing that they provide. Scion Rim, more Scion Rim, Nar Rim, Gamp Rim, a full golden army this really, other than the Kamul's Chosen. Gamp Rim, more Nar Rim, even more Nar Rim, and then there's also upgraded Eastron Clansmen in there as well, and a Dragon's Breath Cannon. We saw that utilised in the Gorge battle probably about a week ago when this one comes out. Got to be careful about this though, because it's not as devastating as it used to be, but it still is an absolutely vital tool if you're going to win a battle like this as Rhun when you're facing off against such quality. Then we have Chris, he too, Flag Rim, Eastron Crossbowmen, going to be another very useful tool. It's something that Umbar do have in their Corsairs, but their Corsairs are so lightweight, and the Runic Archers should be able to get them into their sights. Eastron Crossbows will have the benefit of being in a defensive position. Balkoth Tribesmen as well with the armour upgrade. Javelins will be very useful for throwing down into attacking forces. Wain Riders, it'll be really interesting to see if the Wain Riders can do anything. They can be very useful, but Chariots are very, very finicky. Excuse me. I can only apologise for that. I'll probably have to edit that out, but I got something caught in my throat there as I was talking, and I can still feel the remnants of it coming through in the volume of my voice, but no matter. Scion Rim are here as well. We also have some Variag Mercenaries, some Eastron Clansmen, Gamp Rim, Eastron Clansmen, Flag Rim, Kamul's Chosen Eastron Guard, and Balkoth Tribesmen as well. Over on the other side, interesting to see the armies deploying outside of the settlement. They will have to retreat inside if they want to win this battle, I think. Sword to sword. Lango, he has got some Nar Rim as well. Some cavalry up there we'll get onto in a minute. Clansmen, we also have some Scion Rim. Balkoth Tribesmen, Flag Rim, Gamp Rim, so yeah, pretty much a full complement of Golden Boys for the most part, making up the core of most of these runic armies. Scion Rim and Kamul's Chosen. Interesting to see a unit of Inas Rim here, just regular heavy lancers. Like I said, in Reforged meta, this kind of unit doesn't really shine all that much. You kind of need to have a second hit point to make yourself worth it, based on the way that Reforged works at the moment. I'm sure they're going to try and work on a way to make that no longer the case. But still, the Inas Rim will be interesting to see. They can get a good charge off, but we shall see if that proves to be the case. Eastron Hunters, and then finally over here, have some more Wain Riders from Mevon. Scion Rim, again, full complement of Golden Boys. Gamp Rim, Scion Rim. You've got the Clansmen in there as well. Kamul's Chosen. Very similar armies all around, to be honest with you. Bit of uniformity, and finally a Dragon's Breath Cannon. Now, I will make a bit of a cut, because it's very likely that it's going to take a little while for Umbar to march into position. I would assume as well Rhun are going to move backwards to get into defensive shape as well within the settlement itself. So I'll make a cut, and we'll rejoin when the battle is beginning. So, we're going to be rejoining here because it does look as though Umbar are going to be opening up in the way that was perhaps expected, given the amount of Balakith marksmen they have to work with, and they are going to be getting into a good position here to shoot up into the defensive ranks of Rhun. Now it is worth mentioning, of course, under normal circumstances the defenders could rightly be considered to have the skirmish advantage, but in this situation Umbar can do this sort of thing, and the Rhun will be forced to either get into that skirmish fight with the Balakith marksmen just so they can actually use their ammunition, or they will have to just sort of sit there and take the punishment, which neither option really is too attractive for Rhun. So it'll be interesting to see how the Easterlings decide to deal with that. You can see here the Wain Riders starting to fire their flaming arrows in there, but they are taking a ton of damage as well. And this is the problem. You can see that as soon as the crossbows start getting involved, they're going to start melting these chariots, and they're a big unit model as well, so many of those projectiles are going to hit. And of course the archers are going to be getting involved there as well, so too much damage there for the Wain Riders. And this is the problem when you're sending chariots out all on their lonesome. They're not really going to be able to achieve all that much. You're going to need to send them as part of a general advance, really. If you twin them with some cavalry, it can be a different matter entirely, because then you can charge in, do a lot of damage with the cavalry, and you can really start messing up the ranks with a follow-up charge from the chariots. But if they're out on their own like this, it's very unlikely they're really going to be able to achieve all that much. And they do charge in here. They will at least get one charge off before they perish. They do kill off a few of those Corsair blackguards there, but that is probably going to be the end of this sally forth from these poor Wain Riders. Meanwhile, over on the other side, two of the Umbar armies that are having to go out wide are obviously going to take a little longer to get into position, so there is plenty of time here for Eclipse and Froggy to engage in this kind of skirmish fight before the general advance is going to be ordered with their infantry throughout the settlement. And you can see Lango here is trying his best to weather this storm. Now, I think the best thing to probably do would be to push these Easteron hunters forward and use them to skirmish with the Balakith marksmen, because yes, they would lose fairly handily, but it's better than doing nothing here, because at this point you can see the Rhun are just continuing to be shot, and they have a decent armour value, but this isn't really what they're designed to do, withstand withering arrow barrages, not in the same way that the Balakith marksmen can and often do. Here are the Wain Riders. They're going after the catapult. They nearly make it. In fact, one of the chariots does. It's not going to be enough to kill off the whole crew, though, so it's kind of a moot point. But he does run through those Bodicea spikes that they've got on the side, rolling through some of the Haradrim crewmen for the Umbar artillery. I'm surprised, actually, there's still one of these Wain Riders rolling around out here in the open field. But there they are. Corsair Savages continuing to chase a disposable unit, so it doesn't really matter how they are used. Meanwhile, over here you can see Froggy is engaging in this kind of tactic as well, just like Eclipse is on the other side, putting some pressure on Rhun with the Balakith marksmen. This is why this kind of unit is so useful. And what are they shooting at, however? They're going after the Flag Rim. I mean, from the front, to be honest, the Flag Rim, their armour, their shields, they will take losses, of course, but they're going to be reasonably resilient to that sort of thing. But again, it's free damage that these Balakith marksmen are able to do, and it's one of the more dangerous melee combatants the Rhun has, considering Umbar's strengths and weaknesses. Meanwhile, he has completely pulled the Rhun that were over here back a little bit. Balagaya footmen have taken a little bit of damage themselves, although there's only a few dead bodies there on the floor. Meanwhile, you can see these Wain Riders from Mevon have been used a little bit more conservatively, probably for the best, considering the fate that befell the chariots over on the other side. If you combine them with the Innis Rim, you could do a little bit more damage perhaps, but considering the fact that Umbar have got all of the ranged suppressants for that kind of thing that you would need, you might honestly be better off using the chariots in the late game. The Rim are now opening up. What are they going to be firing at, though? They're going after the Narun Royal Guard. I mean, this is even tougher to bring them down at range than it is to bring down the Balakith marksman. Maybe he's hoping to get a fortuitous kill on Eclipse's general. Umbar's morale is such that that won't be a killing blow regardless, but I can only assume that's what he's thinking here. Lango. Ooh, and there I think we can see, yes, the Dragon's Breath is starting to be utilised, and they do get, there we see the skipping stone effect of the Dragon's Breath, but because these units were in loose formation, only 2 of those Balagai footmen actually ended up dying. In the old days, where the Dragon's Breath projectile was really thick, that probably would have still managed to flatten a good 1/5 of the Balagai footmen unit, which is why the runic artillery piece was toned down for the better. The Age of Empires 2 school of balancing, where you introduce something horrendously overpowered and then nerf it into the dirt soon thereafter. Meanwhile, Balakith marksmen continuing to fire in. They're going to be doing quite a lot of damage here to the runic ranks. Meanwhile, we are also going to be seeing the start of a melee engagement. So Eclipse actually deciding to move in, maybe a little bit further ahead of his allies. Balagai footmen moving in first with the armour upgrade. But the Gamp Rim being on the front line here is going to mean that Rhun would win that fight. Less clear though if all of these Alcarondath Legion and Axguard also join the fray. But Rhun will be feeling pretty good about fighting Balagai footmen. That will not be an issue. Eastron Hunters, yeah, they're going to shoot into the side here. Definitely a good choice, because you can hit the back of some of the shielded units, and the unshielded units will take full damage regardless. And you need something to equalise against those Balakith Axguard. While forward come the Umbar troops, there you can see the Wain Riders of Rhun continuing to use their missile attacks on Umbar as they advance. Again, not huge amounts of damage, simply because there aren't enough projectiles to cause huge amounts of damage. But still, it's better than nothing. Nice bit of harassment on the approach for Umbar, letting them know that they can't just move forward comfortable as you like, because they were able to do that to an extent from the front. They were able to move in and dictate the battle at their own pace. Ooh, hello there. Are they scoring good hits? Or have they nearly hit the Camel's Chosen there? And they're getting a very good hit there into the middle of those Eastron clansmen. Chris probably needs to reorganise his troops so that he's not presenting such a great target there for the Umbar artillery. Last thing you need as the defenders is to allow their attackers to hit right into the heart of your units with artillery like this. Otherwise you're always going to be in a bit of trouble. Quite fortunate there that all of those hits ended up missing. Meanwhile, Balakith marksmen shooting into the side of the flag rim. Obviously trying to get the most out of their ammunition here, trying to negate the shields of the Easterlings as much as they possibly can. Eastron clansmen struggling on the front line against a mix of out-of-ammunition Balakith marksmen, but also there's Ardenheim Shield Guard and Alcarondath Legion in there, so as good as the Eastron clansmen are for an entry-level swordsman, they're going to find themselves horribly outmatched here, which could be the story of this battle if they're not careful, to be honest. And over here as well, not going to go right the way around here is Master Blast. They're not going to go along the ground level approach there, but instead going to move up here to hit Chris from the side. And this could be quite telling actually. We've got the runic player over here, Buzzard. He probably needs to go over and help Chris at this point, because he's going to get double teamed if he doesn't, and if he just cowers back here towards the back end of the settlement, all he's going to do really is be throwing his ally under the bus, and that will really not help Rhun in the long run, because you're allowing Umbar to start taking you apart piecemeal, and their quality will then do the rest in the late game, especially if they still have stuff like their pikes remaining. Speaking of pikes, there are Balagai pikemen on the front line now, which will act as a good deterrent to something like the Gamp Rim. Defeat is almost a certainty. Well, how about that? Balakith marksman continuing to fire away. You can see the artillery streaking through the sky in the background. There's not much of Lango's skirmish force left at this point. It was always a difficult situation, this. This was always going to be a bit of a puzzle for Rhun to try and get through all of the really heavily armoured skirmishers that Umbar have at their disposal. How do you deal with that? I'm not sure Lango dealt with it in the right way, per se. Bit armchair general of me, that, but I think if you were going to not fire back at those Balakith marksmen, there was no point in keeping them up here in the first place. I would have just kept the Eastron Hunters up there as a bit of a counteracting tool. Those Balkoth tribesmen clearly done a little bit of damage, because the Umbar units are looking a little bit more haggard than when they first advanced forward. So that's good, and now they're also going to add themselves to melee. They're not brilliant in melee, but of course it's just more meat for the grinder, for the lack of a better term. Morris's army also now moving forward, so things are really getting underway everywhere as Mevin prepares. Dragon's Breath also. It's not often actually we see this entryway into Umbar actually prove to be the site of a significant engagement. Narim firing into those Balakith shield bearers as they move forward. I mean, they're going to do some damage, but again, Umbar, one of the better factions in the game when it comes to shrugging off arrow fire like this, just because of the ubiquity of heavy armour and shields that they have. But once again, Rhun relying on the Eastron clansmen, Gamp Rim front line to try and be as cost effective as they possibly can, and with a little bit of support from the Narim, and also a little bit of support from this unit. Very useful unit actually, the Camel's Shadow Guard in this particular situation, given the AP. More artillery strikes coming in. That was a good hit. Right into the heart of the Scion Room. Chris really isn't learning his lesson here. Honestly, if I were Chris, I'd pull back. Like, this fight has already gone so badly for you. You're already getting pummeled. I would allow Froggy into the settlement, to be honest with you. And it's quite clear as well that Buzzard is not going to start moving forward to help you. So you may as well bring the fight to Buzzard. And in that case, he is forced to help you. you'll lose some units on the retreat, but it's better than throwing more men into a lost cause, to be honest with you. And at this point, I think that's exactly what this is. Variag mercenaries trying to shoot in, but again, they're going to get some friendly fire, and also Umbar from the front, heavy armour and shields. So over on the south side of the river, I'm really not keen on the way that Rhun have set out their stall. On the north side of the river, the only thing you can say is they wasted some of their archers a little bit unnecessarily, but other than that, they've set things out infantry-wise in a little bit more solid a fashion. And also, Eclipse is only having to deal... Well, Eclipse is only coming through for one player. And then the... who's the other Umbar player that was over here again? Morris is also going after a player. It's not as if one of the runic defenders is being double-teamed in the way that Chris is on the other side. Gamprim, defeat seems certain, which actually somewhat surprises me. I would have... Oh, now it doesn't surprise me. Bit of support coming in from the Corsair Blackguards, which really does make a lot of sense. The Balcloth Tribesmen could be shooting into the backs here of this infantry force. And they really should be, because that'll do a lot of damage to some pretty strong units, and you do need to start making a dent in some of Umbar's infantry. That is, fortunately, exactly what they're going to do, and this is going to be far more devastating on Umbar than it is on Rhun, because a lot of those javelins are actually going over the heads of these Easterlings. It's doing some damage, of course, but it's not carving a hole through the infantry in the way that those tribesmen are. From the back. Very, very nice. And again, this is exactly what you want to do with your settlement. You need to pick a defensive position where you can really make the most of your skirmishers, because you're not going to win in terms of sheer melee quality. You've got units that can do damage in melee, but ultimately if you're Rhun, you need your armour-piercing skirmishers, your javelins and your crossbows to be used extremely effectively. And then you will go on to win this battle. If not, then you're in a bit of trouble. They also have some shadow bows, I think, but they will probably be saved for later. Rangers are, of course, the kryptonite to any attacker if they're used to their fullest potential. Alcarondas Legion taking a bit of damage on the approach. Quite a lot of damage actually being done by these archers. It's to a plethora of units, not just to a singular unit, but still. Good work there from the Narim. They are a little bit more damaging than the other mainline runic option in the Variag Mercenaries. And then you have over here... I mean, Rhun are definitely doing quite well over on the other side, I think. Especially in the further north section, but... Between Master Blaster and Froggy, I think they can afford to be pretty pleased with what's going on at this point. Don't know exactly where some of those units are going. Some Sapphire Bladesmen from Buzzard have moved forward at the very least, and there are some Narim as well. But more needs to be committed here. Like, there's so much of an army left down there doing nothing. And he's the only player, really, that isn't really rolling up his sleeves and getting involved on the front line. Which is an unfortunate sign. Late game glory hunter, perhaps. Variag Mercenaries getting into melee now. They've got the armour upgrade, so they can withstand a bit of punishment, but they are an archer first and foremost. They're not really going to be up to the task of taking on some of the better units of infantry that Umbar can bring to bear. Of course, their savages are on the front line. So a bit of armour-piercing punch as well. Blackguards out of ammunition, perhaps. Rhun have held up reasonably. I mean, there's a few dead Umbar troops. Some of that may have come down to... Oh yeah, Eastron Crossbowmen. I thought that was another unit of Eastron Clansmen for a second then, but this makes a lot more sense if he's utilising some of his crossbows to slow up this assault. There was far too many dead Umbar bodies for it just to be melee troops that did that, and he continues to do his thing. The armour upgrade will save them somewhat from the arrow fire, but not completely. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's happening with Eclipse's push, obviously with just the two angles that he can use from the front. Here you can see some Eastron, well, there are actually some Castamir's Rangers, and he's content to just leave a unit of Balagai footmen and shooting across the river as well. Froggy utilising his catapult. Not sure what he's aiming for, probably the Camel's Chosen. Sniping out that general. I doubt it's the Clansman, and the Innis Rim, they're bottled up already by a unit of spears that Eclipse has got there, so he's not going to advance through that way. He's going to continue to push up through this side and also send over some reinforcements here to assist with Morris's push into the settlement as well. Speaking of which, what have we got going on here? Well, he did actually manage to throw off that initial assault on Evan, so like I said, things going better for Rhun here in the north. They've managed to withstand that assault, and I also think the assault down through the narrower section of the map. And it'd be interesting to see if those two hit. Will they? Are they going after the artillery, I wonder? Well, whatever they were going after, they missed. And then over here, Victory seems certain for Umbar. Eventually they will push through here unless Lango has got more infantry to give to the front line, which he is going to do now. Gamp Rim, nice and simple. And then down here in this trench, yeah, things haven't gone brilliantly for Umbar. They have managed to kill off quite a few Easterlings, but it's definitely not a ratio that favours them. And then you've got those tribesmen up there as well. Can't afford to be as gung-ho as the attackers when it's 4v4. You need to lean on your quality a little bit more. The one Wayne Rider actually did manage to get back inside the settlement, which is pretty impressive. Those Variag mercenaries are getting pushed back. This clutch of troops that Chris has here may end up getting caught between a rock and a hard place here. A little bit more shoring up has occurred over here. Buzzard has got some Gamp Rim up here, and some Flag Rim, so it's good to see that he has sent more reinforcements over here now. It's better late than never, and as a result they've temporarily managed to contain Master Blaster's push up this hill. But I think the key of this is temporarily. Eventually Froggy is going to push up that hill, and then they will have to split their attentions. Sapphire Bladesman, you can see their Master Blaster pushing his axes to try and get in and amongst the action as best they are able. But still they're just waiting, playing the waiting game. Quite a bit of damage has been done there to those Belagaya footmen. I wonder what from. Could just be those depleted archers that have been firing into them for quite a while. Balakith Marksman and Alcarondas Legion still slow and steady, but with that extra unit of Gamp Rim getting their halberds down, I think Umbar 2 will need to commit more to this front line. Yeah, and I think it's interesting this actually. I'm not sure they're going to try and snipe out the Dragon's Breath. They almost got some Balkoth tribesmen there for good measure, but Mevin sees that and he's just simply going to pull his artillery back. But I'm not sure. The attackers over here, Umbar seem to be a little unsure of how to proceed. Eclipse's assault is still bubbling away, but he hasn't maybe made the progress he would have wanted. And then, over here, they have actively been pushed back almost entirely. I'm not sure you can really count this as the assault still going, mainly because these units will be cleaned up pretty quickly, and no more reinforcements are on the way. Like I said, it's always a bad sign for the attackers when one of their attacks completely fails and they have to reset. It's often a sign that their manpower reserves are maybe not quite up to the task, or at least that's the impression that they give. And it's true over here as well. This assault is not going to last forever either. I'd be interested to see if those Blackguards still have ammunition. I would assume not, given the fact that they have drawn their swords. Again, we shall just have to wait and see. Narim continuing to fire, doing a little bit of damage. Fairly even actually this fight at this point, but Umbar, if they just continue to commit units forward, they should be fine. He's also got another little force there getting ready to move through the other route he can take into the settlement. I assume once they start making genuine progress and Chris's army is on the verge of collapse, that's when that little force will then be activated and start moving into the settlement as well, because at that point Buzzard will have to consider what to do very, very quickly. And we shall see if he makes the right decisions. Scion Rim getting engaged by a very small force from Froggy. Froggy probably needs to start getting some of his skirmishers that he has remaining. Some of his units maybe holding a little bit too far back at this point, like they have a real opportunity to wipe Rhun away here. The last thing they want to do is ruin that by being overly cautious. Some more Eastron Hunters up here, much healthier unit than the others. Yeah, and it is, I guess. It is just a case of slow and steady wins the race. Lots of those arrows hitting the cliffside there, but those Eastron Hunters doing steady damage against that one unit of Balagaya footmen, and that could, of course, release the Innis Rim to cause some real havoc to Eclipse's backlines, maybe even go after the artillery piece, which Eclipse has only used very sparingly to ward off the Dragon's Breath, covering the northern approaches. And at this point, yeah, with more infantry on the front line, Eclipse also needs to do something over here, otherwise he is in danger of going down the same path as his ally over on this side, Morris, where one of his assaults is looking like it could utterly collapse. And now the Wayne Riders are out here, so Mevin being rewarded somewhat for the fact that he has waited a little bit longer to utilise his Wayne Riders. At this point he's going to be able to fire in here. I mean, I personally would go after the Balagaya Pikes because you're more likely to actually do damage to them. A few arrows coming in from the other side as well. Limited damage this, but it's something for Umbar to consider. And the fact that the chariots are now out in the open field is a worry for Umbar over on this side, because one good charge into this, at this point, struggling attack, and it could be in for a bit of a rough ride. We'll see. So Balakith the Marksman again, they're resetting. Are they going to attack in a big way once again? Is Morris going to push forward? Eclipse has got a couple of units over here, including some Corsair Blackguards and his Sentinels as well, so his Pikemen. Mevin can afford to be pretty pleased with how that attack went though. Now over here, Javelins being utilised, Balakith Trident, so Master Blaster is taking quite a lot of damage as well at this point, which is part of the reason why Froggy needs to start moving forward with pretty much full force, which looks like that's what's going to be happening now. Alcarondas Legion pushing through the lines, Scion Rim doing their best to hold on, which to be fair, against a battered and bruised force like this, the Scion Rim could be absolutely fine. They're going to continue to hound those E-Strong Crossbowmen back. They are ultimately going to be caught by some Gamp Rim and Flag Rim, which are covering this side. The Sapphire Blazeman out of ammunition at this point, so joining the front line. There's some Balakith Marksmen. Sapphire Blazemen are a very good unit in melee as well, and there's also those Carmel's Chosen. Like I said, I think Chris's fate is somewhat sealed, but he can do more damage than I would have expected, and at that point Buzzard maybe hanging back too much might not be the be-all and end-all for Rhun. Only half of Eclipse's army remains. He's pushing forward with more gusto now, which kind of needed to happen, to be honest with you. Otherwise he was in danger of just being bled slowly by Lango, focusing too much on the Wain Riders at his back, and his decision to send over some really elite units over here to help Morris could be the making or the breaking of Umbar's attack here for the northern half of their city. We shall have to wait and see. There are the Shadow Guard. Still more damage being done by the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. A combination of Flag Rim, Gamp Rim, a few E-Strong Clansmen in there as well. Plenty of AP, which is of course what Rhun are going to be really relying on to equalise this fight, because in terms of pure quality, Umbar have the definite edge over them. Shadow Guard are a bit of a different proposition though, just because of the AP damage they can lay up, but you can say that the Axe Guard really, again, just one-to-one for the most part in terms of unit purpose. There's still Umbar troops down here, still a bit of a melee engagement going on, but not much of one. One Alcarondas Legion, a banner carrier remains, and Morris still has a couple of units down here, but if Rhun wanted to, they could actually clean that up. And they still have a few units in reserve as well that can be committed wherever they choose. I think Master Blaster may have jumped the gun a little bit there. I would have waited a little bit longer before committing this small force, because I think at this point, committing them now is just going to allow Rhun to overrun them pretty easily. E-Strong Clansmen pinning them in melee while those Nar Rim do the bulk of the damage. And I think a little bit too eager to move forward too early. I mean, to be fair, I can see why, because it looks as though Buzzard did send up some more units to help against the main body of Master Blaster's army. Froggy is pushing forward again with too many units dawdling around back here. It's not as if we've been on half speed. A little bit more urgency is required, because the longer Froggy takes, he won't be the one to pay the price. It will be Master Blaster at this point. But we'll have to see. Eclipse, meanwhile, whatever happened to those chariots? There they are. And yeah, this I would say is the right place for the chariots to be. Continue to fire in here. Charge in perhaps, because at this point Umbar have gone pretty much all in on this front line. Rhun, if they can stave off this assault, it really does bode well for them. Having said that, staving off this assault is going to be very difficult, and it may be that Mevin having too many of his units too far away may prove to be a bit unfortunate for them. Narun Aurora Guard taking a hit from the Dragon's Breath cannon there. Javelins being utilised. A unit of E-Strong crossbows that are out of ammunition are going to have to try and bulk up the line to prevent this mass push from Umbar. It is a sign of commitment, this, from Umbar, that they really want this attack to work and to stick. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case, but we'll have to wait and see. Trying to get those Sapphire Blazemen to a position where they can fire, have a clean shot as well. Again, can they... I mean, the Royal Guard at this point are in a position where, like, he could get a really fortuitous hit into Morris's general. Eclipse has also managed to push Lango back over here though, which I guess Lango, he thought that holding onto that choke point wasn't worth it anymore. Holding onto these, however, most certainly is. So all of a sudden here in the north, a bit of progress being made by Umbar perhaps, and it coincides with them throwing more into the fight after the threat of missiles has somewhat lessened. The catapult is trying to shoot into the side of those runic units, but I feel as though this building is completely in the way. On the plus side, this front line from Chris is really going to struggle under the weight of Froggy's army and push, which again is why I was saying Froggy should have been pushing forward with this kind of exuberance a little bit earlier. Again, doing a lot of damage to this building. Blackguards are going to try and fire in. Buzzard sending more up here, perhaps at this point feeling more confident in holding this line, because I mean Master Blaster's army is on its last legs. Now that reinforcements from Buzzard have arrived in numbers, Master Blaster's army is in tatters really. And this push over here was one made more in desperation. The Innis Rim are actually over here. I'm not sure why they were charging into Royal Guard per se. Maybe he wanted to try and get a lucky tag on the general. I think this is all of the general's bodyguard units. Indeed, there he is. Right up in the business of all of this cavalry, so they could still get fortunate, but this Innis Rim is probably going to be killed off by all of these spears, to be honest with you. I have to say, I think Rhun are in a pretty decent position for defenders in a situation like this. This is the sort of thing which can reverse the tide, though. A solid hit there right into the heart of this Easterling front line. We've had a few evil versus evil encounters lately, haven't we? Been rather interesting. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who's going to come out on top yet, because I think both sides have had their moments. I think the attackers' best moments have come when they've come forward in extreme numbers, as they have done now with Froggy Eclipse on two fronts, supporting Morris as well. That's where Umbar have been at their strongest. Rhun have been at their strongest, meanwhile, by isolating smaller elements of the Umbar army and doing their damage that way. Again, this is pretty much all Umbar have in the north at this point, so if they do run out of steam here, it is all over for this northern assault. They will end up doing quite a bit of damage in for the bargain as well, but whether that proves to be worth it or not, we'll have to wait and see. This Umbar attack as well from Morris, he had a few more units in reserve, and they will eventually make their way through these Eastlings, but it won't be without cost because the Gamprim are there, being backed up by the armour upgraded Clansmen as well. That is a decent little combination. Rhun may wish to start retreating over to the other side of the river actually, because with Master Blaster's army faltering, Chris I think will still be killed by Froggy's attack, but you can start to think about now retreating to where Buzzard had his army previously. It's a little bit prematurely placing it there really, but it is still an option. Meanwhile, the few Eastron hunters that were constantly poking and prodding at that one unit of Belagai footmen have now been isolated by some Elkarondas Legion and will be punished for their transgressions. They probably, racked up a decent little kill count for themselves, given how Lango's skirmish line really did struggle at the opening of this battle. You can't have too many complaints, I don't think. Elsewhere, let's see. Yeah, I mean, Master Blaster's army, Bouncer Force is evenly matched at this point. Froggy has managed to get some units around. Did he go up here? Can you actually traverse this? I highly doubt it. He must have sent some units all the way around, I guess, in support. There are the Sapphire Bladesmen. Well, regardless, Master Blaster's army almost completely gone. He is still a presence on the field, but Easterling's starting to struggle a bit, and I think obviously the art of defending, part of it is knowing when to retreat, and I think that moment has come. If you can save anything at this point, you should be thinking about heading towards a final place to make your stand, which Umbar usually is over on this side of the river at the back of the settlement over here. Now an Royal Guard getting shot from afar and being engaged by Eastron clans, and apparently that's enough to give the Easterlings the edge in this battle. I'm not too convinced about that. I think the Royal Guard are simply too tanky for them. Eastlings over here really starting to struggle. A few of the units, you always know you should be panicking when a few unit models start to creep around the edge of your lines and start stabbing your units in the back. Worrying scenes for them. Meanwhile, DF Morris continuing to push forward. Mevin still has units over here though, including the tanky Scion Rim being backed up by a few Valkoth tribesmen. But Umbar's push, you have to say, it was a bit of a success. The Flag Rim are going to come in here as well to try and equalise that fight. There's not much in the way of support, only 21 Nar Rim. I mean, it did cost Umbar. You have to say that. Like, they don't have much left, but ultimately it was successful. And they will be able to push Rhun back. They are pushing their artillery up here though, which will worry Umbar a little bit, but it could also go horribly, horribly wrong for Rhun. I suppose they're thinking we're never going to be able to make it across to the final stand with what we have left. So they're going to try and retreat what they can. And they absolutely should be doing that, like I said. Interesting that Eclipse still has yet to attack through here. He's got enough to attack through here. It's a very narrow choke point, which is what I assume he's worried about. I mean, there are Carnals chosen here, which they're strong. Scion Rim are tough to break down, not necessarily the most damaging, but you will need something capable of chucking out some decent damage. I guess he's focusing over here. Ooh, and they did pull back, and what they're going to try and do here clearly is use that artillery, hope to get some good shots quickly. I mean, they're going to have time to get like one shot, basically. So unlucky that. Falling centimetres short of hitting centre mass of some of those Corsair Blackguards, and then it would have been a good idea, but unfortunately if they can get another... The Dragon's Breath crew is actually worth saving as well though, that's the thing. That might be the last ammunition he had, because he has been firing that cannon intermittently throughout the whole battle at this point. But the Dragon's Breath crew, of course, are a bodyguard infantry unit. That's really what sets them apart as an artillery crew, so they are very much worth saving. 75 of them in the late game could prove to make a big difference indeed. Well, what's going on here? We still have Umbar Master Blasters, yeah, like Elite Spears. They were going to be able to overrun the Eastron Clansmen eventually, and it could be that that Umbar quality is what sees them over the line in the battle as a whole. Master Blaster's army really is weakened by his exertions moving up this way, however. Froggy's is healthy though, so maybe he can see this as a win. Swings and roundabouts, I suppose. If Froggy had been more aggressive, Master Blaster's army would have been less damaged, but his would have been more damaged, so someone has to be the fall guy, and on this occasion, for the attackers, I believe that was Master Blaster. Meanwhile, still some Sapphire Blazemen back here. Individually, they're very strong, but they are being overwhelmed in melee. Of that, there can be no doubt, with those big Folkses that they wield. I mean, I think Umbar will probably win from this position, to be honest, unless Rhun can utilise a high-value skirmisher to good effect, something like the Rangers. But I don't know how many of them they have left. I mean, Buzzard's artillery hasn't really been used, but also the terrain of this part of the map, I'm not entirely sure it's going to be useful. You need to be fighting uphill, really, to get clean shots with artillery like that. They've sent more reinforcements over here, I think, actually, Rhun. Yeah, Flag Rimmer over here now. I'm not entirely sure why. I would have probably tried to save this unit. A single unit of Flag Rim could be really, really useful come the late game. Nar Rim as well, firing uphill. Maybe they still fancy their chances over here, Lango and Mevin, to completely finish off the Umbar assault in the north, or at least make it so that the reinforcements they're going to be offering to attack the final stand with are going to be very, very limited. Umbar continuing to be peppered. One of the Dragon's Breath crew got left behind inadvertently. Unit pathfinding at its very finest. Meanwhile, let's go and see what Eclipse is doing on his own over here. And Rhun continuing to win. There are some Dragon's Wrath guildsmen. Those tribesmen probably still have a bit of ammunition to them. Clansmen. Let's not forget as well the Sentinels, Eclipse's best unit in melee, he committed with Morris, so... Actually no, he does have the Harbingers of Castamere somewhere, doesn't he? Unless he committed those to that blob as well. It's kind of hard to tell. Does he have anything out here? Nope. Just some Rangers, so attacking Rangers. Something else for the defenders to be potentially worried about. Now there they are, the Harbingers of Castamere are in here. So yeah, in terms of melee, they should have the beating of the Carmels chosen, but Rhun continuing to fight for every inch, not allowing Umbar free ground. And I mean, if you can get those javelins into the side of that front line, you could do so much damage that you could outright win that fight. I don't believe you have enough over here to stop the remnants of Morris's army and what's left of Eclipse over here from being victorious, to be honest. Again, the best you can really hope for is just to do some extra damage as they push forwards, which is exactly what they're doing, to be fair. What are they actually firing at? No, they are going after the Rhun Reforged. Eastern Hunters will find it pretty damn difficult to make a huge impression on a unit like that. Extremely heavily armoured as they are. And now forward come Umbar. Master Blaster's spears still just about alive. 60 of them remain. So that little force did manage to hold on in the end. More Easterlings coming forward. More flaming shots trying to shoot at those Harbingers of Castamere. I mean, if they can push forward here quickly, they will prevent any more units coming from across the bridges to help shore up the final stand, which would be interesting to see if they could pull that off. Ooh, and the thuds of those Dragon's Breath cannons, and yeah, going after the Rhun Reforged. I think this is the best time to use it, to be honest with you, because you can't really shoot that downhill, and that's obviously the defensive position that the defenders are going to strike up. Chris already having his Silent Rim in position ready for the beginning of the end. And that is Lango's General. Eclipse's Harbingers doing the business against the Carmel's Chosen. Rhun continuing to fire again. The Rhun Reforged have actually been the target of quite a lot of the Easterling arrows in this battle. And I'm not entirely sure why, because they're one of the best heavy archers in the game at withstanding that kind of punishment. Ooh, did they actually get kills there? They did. Could have been worse for the Alcarondas Legion, and it may very well still be worse. Very fortunate that the artillery didn't die as well. Yeah, and you can see now Rhun Reforged, they will be able to surround Lango's efforts to keep them contained here. Again, you can question, should some of these units at least have been retreated back to the other side of the bridge to prepare for the coming storm? Maybe. And over here. Rhun. I mean, Sentinels as well. This is the problem. Most pikes you can effectively counter with Sentinels. Or with archers, I should say. But with the Sentinels, their heavy armour and their shield value makes that a completely different proposition. Still, I mean, you may as well fire them at this point. There's only 19 of those archers left. What very little remains of Rhun. I mean, I guess this was a situation, fairly healthy Alcarondas Legion, healthy flag rib. You can see that this is pretty much the best showcase of these two units battling against one another. There are other units in and around them, but the Alcarondas Legion win, but they're heavily depleted by doing so. But it does go to show the armour piercing is not enough to make up for the gap in quality between the two overall. Meanwhile, what are these shots doing? Umbar actually not winning that frontline fight, which I find somewhat surprising. Dragon's Breath Cannon continuing to fire. The Rhun Rim continuing to bathe the Black Numenorians in flame. And they've got a decent little position over there for those 21 Rhun Rim. Just dump what's left of their ammunition into the backs of the Umbar that are still here. Some of these units have slipped around the side. Master Blaster's Royal Guard that are still alive, trying to finish off the heavily depleted cavalry. Again, I'm not sure about this choice. You're very likely to kill your own men, and that's exactly what's happening here. Indeed, you actually rout this full front line, and this is the thing, like, you need a clean shot with the Dragon's Breath if you're going to use it. And Rhun really are paying the price there. There wasn't really a good target, I suppose. Yeah, they're going to try and snipe the artillery out now to add insult to injury. They do hit some enemies there. And again, so they are managing to score some decent hits, but that won't last for too much longer. Now Umbar's infantry are moving forward. They are really going to try and stop the runic cannons from thundering. And over here, Umbar completely victorious against Lango, and I think just what's left of the Easterlings now routing. So finally the runic resistance here on the northern side of the settlement is broken. Eclipse and Morris still have a decent little force for them as well, so in the end staying back here for as long as possible probably didn't bear fruit for Mevon and Lango, and they should have retreated some more units back to the, not the town centre, but the final stand. But we'll see. I think Umbar from this position probably have the martial strength to win this battle, but it could depend on whether or not those runic rangers, which I have seen, reveal themselves from hiding and move around the battlefield a couple of times. If they can get a decent shot in, maybe not all is lost for the Easterlings. These strong crossbowmen having to bank their shots a little bit. They'll do damage where they connect, but...
Lord protect us. Our general lies slain upon the battlefield.
That is Eclipse's general, apparently, as well. Which I find somewhat hard to believe, because I think that must have been Master Blaster's general, even though the announcer said it was their army's general. Master Blaster's generals lived a pretty charmed existence up to this point, though, so it's not surprising, and also the Dragon's Breath is now going to be stopped dead in its tracks. They're very difficult to kill individually, of course, but they're going to be overwhelmed, and as much as these cannons try to wheel themselves away, they are going to lose their final piece of artillery here, Rhun. And one of its final acts was, of course, to rout a struggling Easterling front line. Meanwhile, there is a red triangle over here. Is that just a routing unit? It's one Carmel's chosen from Mevon, who is trying to march back to the final stand, but unfortunately is pathfinding, Medieval 2 pathfinding at its finest. He is marching into the side of the bridge. And the Sentinels will... oh, yeah, there we go. Not entirely sure what he was stabbing at, but this is almost certainly going to be the end of him. You hate to see it. Usually it's artillery where we see Medieval 2's dodgy pathfinding at its finest, but occasionally the units can suffer from that sort of thing as well, especially where bridges are concerned, to be honest with you. You can see here the Dragon's Breath crew, though, really showing off what they can do in melee, because it really is taking an awful lot of effort to bring them down. What do Rhun actually have left before I cast aspersions on their chances? Guildsmen, depleted Narim out of ammunition, Narim that still have ammo, Carmel's chosen, full complement of Scion Rim, more Guildsmen, more Flag Rim, crossbows, useful, Hunters, Scion Rim, and this is just what we can see. I'm pretty sure there's a unit of Shadow Bows around here somewhere. I believe I was part of like the first run of this scenario once upon a time. But unfortunately the pathfinding on the map itself was all kinds of messed up, and it was also horribly unbalanced. This though looks much more like it, I have to say. This Dragon's Breath crew really giving a damn good accounting of itself. Is this guy still fighting? He is. I mean, it does go to show, I guess, that even the Naru Sentinels don't have humongous attack scores because they are pikemen, but... and I guess it does show how reasonably tanky the Carmel's chosen are as well. Surely that's the end, though. There he goes. I think that was actually one of the Naru Royal Guard in the end, which had to come in and stab him through the back. And over here, Froggy still has a decent number of troops that he's shuffling towards the front line. So it's not as if everything they had here in the south was committed to bringing down the Dragon's Breath crew. But now you can see just sheer weight of numbers going to be enough to finish them off. It's an artillery crew, but not as we know it. Be interesting to see if Reforged in future patches leans more heavily on the idea of making the artillery crew a unit in and of itself, because it really is only the case for the Dragon's Breath crew, at least in a substantial way. So I know that Silmarillion have dipped into that a little bit, where the artillery crew is essentially a unit that exists in the roster, just a smaller version of it. And I do wonder if that's going to become more normal in Reforged as well. It'd be interesting. I think it would actually make the artillery crews a little bit more useful. But whether that's a good thing or not, I guess, is debatable. Because the artillery, you should make it a little more expensive for that then. Given the fact that most of the damage from the artillery comes from it itself, and if the units themselves are also somewhat useful, you should also factor that into how much they cost. The Dragon's Breath do rout in the end, which will mean the final phase of the battle, as often happens, the natural order of things often works it to be this way. The final 10k frames is going to be taken up by the final assault. Will Umbar have enough left in the tank to complete their reconquest of their city, or will they run out of steam in the face of Rhun? Not sure what those Sapphire Blades were doing in there. I mean, it's a neat little hidey hole, I guess, but only if it's a unit that can hide. And also, I think it's so close to the main road that you would see them, I guess. Although you'd have to keep an eye on the minimap very closely because it's very hidden. Could work out, I suppose. We rarely actually see the Umbar settlement final stand take place all the way back here. Usually the defenders elect to live and die by the sword on this hill, which they have already given up. So we have that going for us at least. That is a little bit different to the norm. Still units making their way across here. And I think what we will do actually is go up to ×2 speed while this is going on, because it's probably going to take a little while for them, or actually even ×6 speed, so it's probably going to take a little while for Umbar to start moving in the right direction. In fact, that will do, now that Rhun are already shooting. I'm not sure where they're going. I really don't know what Eclipse is doing by sending his units that way. You're not really gaining anything there. You don't need an entire army to take on the Innis Rim. There are only 3 of them left, for Christ's sake. As soon as they charge in, they'll probably kill themselves. Meanwhile, the Nar Rim, very depleted, but still getting as much of their damage downrange as possible before they're inevitably sacrificed to the front line in melee. You can see here the Nar Rim projectiles doing their thing and setting surfaces on fire. It's purely cosmetic, but still, it looks pretty neat. And it's the kind of mess that Umbar will have to clean up from their capital if they are successful in retaking it. Just a few Royal Guard here. Morris's general all bloodied up. And Umbar moving back once again. What is Eclipse doing? Hanging out way further back than is typical. Maybe he's concerned about the presence of Rangers, so one player will stand back just in case the Rangers rip their way through the rest of what Umbar have. I suppose that's a legitimate concern, given how strong Rangers really are. And now Rhun with a counter charge here. The E-Strong crossbows coming forward though. They're going to need more than that. The Flag Rim are going to need to move forward as well, otherwise the Ardenheim Shield Guard are simply going to absorb that charge with total ease, and then withstand the beating, in quotation marks, that the E-Strong crossbows can give in melee. And here we go. The final phase now underway. Balaketh Marksman. Defeat is a distinct possibility. There are the Scion Rim. What have we got going on over here? E-Strong crossbowman charging forwards. I guess the units that Rhun have are not really poor in this situation. There is this unit of Nar Rim as well from Buzzard, which is almost completely healthy with a bit of ammunition, so their DPS is going to be decent. The real question is though, they've got some Sapphire Bladesmen, a little bit depleted, so they've already been used. I'm not sure how much ammunition they have left. Some Hunters, Guildsmen, no Rangers. I refuse to believe I completely missed the Rangers. There was a unit of Shadowbows, I saw them. Unless I'm just losing my mind completely. They're the Harbingers of Castamere. Again, not entirely sure about the organisation of this front line. Mevin sending forward his crossbows and his Dragon's Breath, but all of these units are still in loose formation. They need to get into solid formation and advance into Rhun. But it is these 2 units of Nar Rim that are going to be offering most of the support. If it were crossbows, this could be different, but like I said, Umbar are pretty good at dealing with this kind of damage. We'll see if it proves to be a decisive factor. And there is still, of course, Eclipse's wave to come in as well. There are the Sapphire Bladesmen. Really useful in melee as well, actually. There may only be 36 of them, but a unit of genuine quality in melee, capable of dishing out damage even to Umbar. The same can be said of the Guildsmen and of the Cummels, chosen of course E-Strong Hunters. So much of the runic support here and much of their hopes are going to be pinned on archers. Low to mid-tier archers. Will that be enough? Against a lot of factions, I would say probably yes. Against Umbar, though, I'm not sure. I don't think they'll be able to deal damage quickly enough, considering there's still quite a few units that need to be dealt with. As we look down here, for example, there's Master Blaster's catapult crew. Customers ranges from Eclipse, that's another problem that Rhun are going to have to try and deal with eventually. What is this over here? There is a unit, apparently, allegedly. Where is he? Oh. Well, there is a unit of Flag Rim, I guess, from Mevon that is on the front line over on the other side, but those two again, pathfinding. You hate to see it. Defeat is a distinct possibility. Ooh, and you can see over here as well, Umbar pushing their way up here, interrupting the Nar Rim from firing, so the hopes that Rhun would have had for their skirmishers to do the business continuing to be interrupted. And they continue now to fire into the approaching Umbar infantry. Over here, I think, yeah, Nar and Aru sentinels. If only they had a unit. If these were crossbows, it could be so different, because they would be knocking down whole chunks of units per volley with those armor-piercing projectiles, but the situation being what it is, I'm not convinced. Dragon's Wrath Guildsman. Forward comes from Scion Rim to help shore things up alongside some existing Guildsmen and Scion Rim that are here. There's the Castamir's Rangers as well. I don't know if he can get a good shot. Maybe if you put them here, you could shoot through the ranks, but that exposes them. There's the Shadow Guard. I thought they were the Shadow Bows for a second then. Maybe they don't have Rangers on the defence. It's a little bit questionable if that's the case. I'm sure they did. But it's questionable that the attackers get access to Rangers and the defenders don't. I think even aside from that, Umbar would probably go on to win this. But you never know, I suppose. You're holding on well over on this side, but that may be because they've got both the Sapphire Bladesmen and the Carmel's Chosen doing the business over here. I think the difference ultimately is going to be the Umbar Pikes. There goes another Runic General. Still the Nar Rim doing their thing, going after the very dangerous Castamir's Rangers. The front line is looking a little bit skewed at this point, though. It would be pretty poor if Umbar were to somehow throw this away at this stage. I don't know what these Nar and Aru Sentinels from Froggy are doing. He must have given them an order or a misclick or something, because this is not correct at all, to be brutally honest. Yeah, now they're reforming themselves. They need to get back over there, to be honest with you, because Rhun are actually winning on that side now, which is bad news for Umbar. But of course they still have plenty of projectiles doing their thing. Corsair crossbows as well, this is a real issue. Some of the Alcarondas Legion have pushed their way up here and are continuing to interrupt the Nar Rim. You can see Buzzard is trying to get his units into guard mode, trying to make them continue shooting. But this unit has got a very limited shelf life if he's doing that, because it means they're not really going to be properly defending themselves against the Alcarondas Legion. Even if they were, though, they're very outmatched in that melee fight. Defeat seems certain. Again, it's a very close battle, this. It's very competitive. But I do think it would be a bit of a throw from Umbar, like that, moving those Nar and Aru Sentinels, by accident or not, could prove to be a real disaster. They've also still got some artillery here. Master Blaster rolling his catapult forward. I mean, that could be really risky, actually, because the Runic front lines generally are thinner than the Umbar one, so you stand more of a chance of actually hitting some friendly fire. Still some Guildsmen here in reserve. Those crossbows in the background continue to fire. They probably don't have the best angle of fire, but they are continuing to shoot into these Nar Rim. Probably the best unit they can go after, or at least the cleanest target they have, so they may as well. And cutting away Rhune's support should leave Umbar in too strong a position for their foes to come back from. Emphasis on should. These Ardenheim Shield Guard are pointing the wrong way, which you don't want to see. Again, the organisation of these front lines here in the late game from Umbar has been pretty horrendous, if I'm being honest, so they really need to do a little bit better than that. I think, again, they should be able to rely on their pikes to slowly but surely win their fight for them, and the fact that they've got these units over here carving through the Nar Rim and Rhun don't really have any ranged support anymore. That should be enough that Umbar can't really throw this game anymore. And I've seen stranger things happen. And it's not as if the units that are fighting for Rhun are bad. At this stage, the worst unit they have for the situation is probably the Scion Rim, just because of the lack of damage, but it's also so key for holding these lines together. The Shadow Guard are also going to be capable, really capable, of dishing out the damage to all of these heavily armoured Black Numenorian infantry. Decent hit there by the catapult, letting the guildsmen know they can't just sit there and do as they please. 67 Eastron Hunters still there. 4 Corsair Blackguards that have managed to get in behind the lines. It is close, very close. Rhun, however, are 2% points behind, so they really need to be killing at a faster rate, and that's where I think the problem will come in, because of the ubiquity of pikes and very solid units from Umbar. Although that's not a good sign for Umbar. Belagaya footmen starting to rout, Carmel's chosen. They're starting to lose now though, that's the problem. Now that the Nar Rim have been slain, they're going to have to deal with these units coming in from the side as well. A small pocket of resistance though it may be, I think this may be finally the thing which breaks the Easterling resilience. And what have we here? Yeah, I mean at this point you may as well go after those guildsmen, to be honest with you, because they're the only clean target you have for the catapult, and it's not worth taking your life into your hands by shooting the front line, because yes, you could rout Rhun, but you could just as easily rout yourself. And given the fact that if the battle keeps going as it is, you will almost certainly be the winner, there's no sense in risking it. If it were the other way around and Rhun were the ones with the catapult, I would say yeah, you need to risk it at this point. Says victory is, again though, Rhun starting to get shaken up, their morale not quite on the same level as the Black Numenorians they're facing. Indeed, the upper echelon have got locked morale for Umbar. The true Numenorian units. Carmel's chosen, still doing really well though, still 44 of them remain. There goes another runic general, one of the Corsair fencers, running him through with the rapier. Careful there, that nearly took the heads off most of this section of the front line. Still those 3 Corsair Blackguards who've got javelins, there may only be 3 of them, but at this point this is the kind of thing which, if each javelin results in a kill... It's close though. If the Easterlings had elected to retreat a couple more of their units from across the other side of the river, I do think Rhun actually would have been victorious on this occasion, but it is looking more and more now, with Rhun generals falling in step with one another. The Umbar will reclaim their city. Eastron Hunters being thrown onto the front line in desperation. The only hope they have now is a stray catapult shot routing off most of Umbar, and I think now even that probably wouldn't be enough to see this battle go in the other direction. Well, there goes one of the Umbar units, or generals, killed off by a Scion Rim. Ooh, a Javelin unit in good position. Well, I guess decent position. A position where they can at least get some Javelins into what's left of the runic resistance. They're going to start to try and pull through here. Morris pushing through. I mean, the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen have got very high melee defense. It's enough to make the Elves be impressed. I think it's like 26 melee defense or something. Of course, they don't have multiple HP though, and their armor values, as with most of the runic mid-tiers, are okay, but not spectacular. And they're a relatively small unit as well, with a ranged attack, so they're a bit of a weird unit, the Guildsmen, to be honest, but still. Utilising those very curved blades. Also Blackguards continuing to fire. Casimir's Rangers in a very dangerous position now. Firing right up the runic line. What's happening in the other choke point? Again, these Carmel's Chosen have impressed me, to be honest. Is that a rout? No, it's not. There goes another Umbar general. Scarcely any generals remaining. Why did they retreat then? Oh, I see, they're pursuing a unit that's already routing. They're pursuing the Eastron Hunters. Fair enough. Still, the Carmel's Chosen, a lot of people deride the Carmel's Chosen, me included, for being a pretty average General's Bodyguard unit. But they've shown themselves to actually do their job very, very well. They're a little bit one-dimensional in comparison to a lot of other Bodyguard units, given that like they're sword and board and there's nothing too special about them, but it still doesn't change the fact they've got a second hit point and their stats are very high. They can hold the line with the best of them. Catapult crew moving forward, and the Carmel's Chosen will be the last of the runic units left, to be honest, because there's 10 of these guildsmen left, but they are being hunted. That catapult crew is probably going to feed into some runic kills somewhat. Percentage has probably gone more in favour of Umbar. No, actually, it still remained at 2% being the difference. But again, another high quality scenario, you would say, as we are now within the final 1,000 frames. Umbar victorious. Come the Chosen again. Of them remain. Corsair crossbows still alive. The Umbar unit's caked in blood. Their enemies and their own. And 2 guildsmen. Well, one's currently being butchered in the background there, but still, he will be finished. Still got a catapult remaining. I wonder why the others went. I wonder what broke them in the first place. Something of an interesting question to answer. But there we go. And it is going to be Buzzard, the last player, last defender left standing, with his Carmel's Chosen. But yeah, it was a game that really was quite topsy-turvy. There were moments on both the north and south side of the river where the attackers and the defenders were on top, but in the end, quite so. But in the end, I think it was Rhun's use of their skirmishers which ultimately didn't do them any favours, because too often I saw them firing into stuff like Nara and Ara Royal Guard. Doesn't matter that the general's in there, they are too tanky to be using your archers on. And I think that was the key. It became more and more a matter of just brute strength as the battle went on. And between these two factions, Umbar are better at doing that than Rhun. Rhun can somewhat keep pace thanks to their armour piercing. But ultimately, the overall quality will tell in the end, as we saw. So, let's see what did the damage for Umbar. Nara and Ara Royal Guard did well, of course. They stood and fought for a long time. Harbingers of Castamere, that's a very good performance from them. 406 kills, always good for a melee unit to get that high. Several units breaking the 200 barrier, most of them more damaging, especially with the Balakathak's Guard there you can see, doing the business, showing that AP is useful against Rhun. Corsair Blackguards breaking 200, several units breaking 100 as well. Down here, again, Alcarondas Legion proving themselves to be such a good workhorse on the front line. Balakith Marksmen over a longer period of time also showing themselves to be superior to any long period skirmisher than Rhun really had access to. They only had one unit of Variag Mercs, to be honest with you, and the rest was all Narim, which were a little bit more focused around dealing damage, which they did fine, but again, choice of targets, because it was fine margins this. If they had saved one extra unit, if they had used their ammunition slightly better, I don't think Umbar would have won. 328 kills on Corsair Blackguards, so their javelins must have been used very well, and then in melee they must have had a favourable fight also. But yeah, good all around. So big thank you to Eclipse for sending me yet another battle replay. Always good to see these, because they always tend to be high quality, as this one certainly was. And a big thank you to all of the players for being a part of it as well. Like I said, this is the last scenario from Eclipse, and indeed anyone else that I've got for the time being, because I've used all of them at this point. But again, because I'm running over a month ahead of time at this point, you know, it's likely that I will probably get more in the interim, but still, always good to see more of them. Like I said, channel update probably already would have happened at this point one way or the other, I think. Now that we should be into March at this point by the time these replays come out, so I would be very surprised if that wasn't the case. But still, do keep an eye out for what that will be, because that will probably be a live stream as well, where I'll be talking about in greater detail what was alluded to in the New Year's live stream, where I can talk a bit more about the exact schedule of when the channel is going to undergo the changes I've already stated. But other than that, yeah, we will continue. Got a battle on Azanulbizar that I will be doing at some point in Reforged. I've got a few more Langos, Cardland Outpost replay, which seems to be an ever-present, will eventually be done and uploaded, I swear. But yeah, we shall see. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.